This is an interesting time, bookends, if you will. I'm Joel Myer, formerly Robert Joel of KMAS Radio, with Jeff Slakey of KMAS Radio,
Always been just Jeff Slakey.
just Jeff Slakey. As a matter of fact, when I was first hired here, I came from Walla Walla. And the guy in Walla Walla thought that Joel Myer sounded too much like the extension agent name.
Uh-huh.
He says, I want you to use a different air name. Okay, great. So we came up with my middle name and my first name, Robert Joel. And when I came here, the station manager at that time said, keep that name.
That's awesome.
So for all 11 years that I worked here, from 1980 to 91, it was Robert Joel.
People think that my name is a fake name, a stage name. And I go, I could have come up with something a whole lot better than Slakey.
And I still run into people from that era that I met when I first came to town that still call me Robert,
Sure.
which is okay.
I mean, I know DJs that people have no idea what their real first name is, you know? And even now, I still refer to them as their on-air names, even though they're not their on-air names. You know, it just makes it easier because that's what you've known them by.
Right. Well, I want to go to origin stories.
Sure.
And I love origin stories for a lot of different industries, but it's interesting to learn how people became interested in radio and then were able to get into radio. So let's start with your origin story.
Very, it was an interesting story because so I had graduated from high school, Tumwater High School, right, 1997, moved down to Oregon and taught drums at a couple high schools down there, and then was going to go to Western to be a teacher. That's where my brother went and was going at the time, and so I was going to get my AA and then go up to Western. Started taking some communication classes, and I loved them. Public speaking, interpersonal, conflict resolution, any of those. So we started doing those, and then I ended up not going the teaching route, but then go into the communications route. And after I graduated, I had a great idea that, and I still in the back of my head want to do this, but I want to be a game show host.
Nice.
Okay. And all the best game show hosts started in radio.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured that would be a good way to do it. But I didn't have any idea. So up in Bellingham, there's a couple stations, and I was trying to create air check tapes without having any idea of how you even do it. You know, you go, hey, it's Jeff Slakey, and here's the latest from Bruce Springsteen on WXYZ or something like that. And finally, my dad called and said, I don't know what you're doing. This is crazy. Bates Technical College has a broadcast school. It's 91.7 KBTC. We will say you can move back home and live back with the parents while you go to Bates and pursue this. And so we did that. And so I already had my degree. So I wasn't interested in any of the other classes at Bates. It was all on air. I didn't even care about the engineering part of it. I just want to be on the air. And my instructor was a guy named Willie Kelly, and he did afternoons in the 80s at KGY in Olympia.
Yes.
And so he allowed me to go on the air, and it was normally like a 9-month course, and you didn't get on the air until your last few months, really. But I worked hard and I pushed him hard, and within a month or so of being there, I was doing my first newscast and then my first hour on the music radio there, and it went from there. And so I was on the air at 91.7 all the time, as much as I could be, for hours on end. And one day KGY called. It was Larry Bailey was the program director there, and he called Willie and said, do you have anybody that can intern, anybody that's good that can intern here at KGY? And he said, well, I don't know about good, but I got someone who's local. And so since I was at Olympia and KGY's right on the water, I went over there and met Larry and Dick Poost and Tom Trotzer and like the whole gang at KGY. And I started part-time there. And I was there for a few months, and then I saw an opening here. And Steve George was the program director at that time. And so I came out and met him in the production room, and it was right as Dale and Jerry kind of took over the ownership. I think I was Dale's first hire or something like that. Anyways, so that was 17 years ago.
Wow. I think it would be my guess that you are probably the longest tenured person to work at KMAS other than an owner. So that's pretty
Maybe.
impressive.
And and what's weird is that it doesn't feel like 17 years. I definitely don't feel like I've been here that long. Um, so that was 2005. I'm going to be I'm 42. I'll be 43 this summer. So this was like, yeah, 25 years old and starting to do the part-time stuff here.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating how some people take a direct route, which it sounds like you did,
Yeah,
and others it takes them a while to get into it and find their niche. For example, when I was hired here, I was hired as the morning um, country music DJ because back in 1980 it was a daytime country music radio station. Changed its format a couple of years later. Always got the calls. What happened to that good country music?
sure.
That was the call, and so I was supposed to be a DJ. And after a while, the station manager at that time says, "I want you doing news." And so after just a couple of months, I was in doing news, and that was I had found my niche.
Huh.
I was a terrible disc jockey, absolutely horrible, horrible disc jockey, but I really enjoyed doing news. And one of the things that I've been really impressed that you've done here, Jeff, is that you've been curious. There's some people that fall into their positions and they do the rote thing. And it's basically I'm showing up, I'm punching the clock, spinning the discs, nothing new there. But you get to do something different every single day, or have been able to,
Yeah,
which I think has probably given you a master's degree in what you've learned probably over those years, over and above other folks.
there's a lot in it. There's a lot that goes into the daily running of this radio station or any radio station. And when I first got here, um, listen, I didn't have plans on being here this long. I don't think anybody would have. Couple years, you know how it is.
Sure,
2 years, 3 years, and then you move to the next level of the market, and then you just slowly move your way up.
sure.
But then you kind of build relationships, and you meet the community, and the community meets you, and you all kind of play nice together, and then it's new things all the time, like you said. We're I remember a time, so I was weekends, then I did afternoons for a while, and then I did the mornings with Diedrich, and then Dale and I did the mornings for a long time when we switched to talk. And there were times when Dale and I did the morning show that he wouldn't know what the studio would look like when he would come in. I would stay around and I'd tweak different things all the time. I'm sure it drove him crazy. I'm sure it did. And he was a good sport about it, but I always would try to make things a little bit better every time to have the product that for the listener to be good, whether or not that's us looking at each other or the way the microphones were set up or just something to make it an easier on us to be able to broadcast uh, more effortlessly, I guess.
Mhm. There's one thing about local radio that I don't think people think about a lot, and I think it's really important in this case, drawing on what you were just talking about, is that local radio is a part of the identity of the community. And the fact that you have brought through such a variety of interviews. Of course, there are set pieces like
Mm-hmm.
with the city of Shelton, the sheriff's department, and so on, and that are, but the really different ones you can throw in there that really help people find that there's locality no matter what the topic. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's an important thing for a local station. And I bet you feel pretty good about being able to bring that in.
I like, I kind of go back and try to see how many folks I talk to every year. I mean, it kind of breaks down to be about one a day. So I would say, but you're right, there's the same ones every year. It's kind of, oh, it's June. That means we're talking Forest Festival. Or it's October, it must be Oyster Fest
And
time.
thank God for those things, by the way.
Exactly, exactly. And so, those kind of come around. But then there's the people that have their new business or they've started a new nonprofit or there's a fundraiser going on for somebody in the community. And I have tried to just kind of be an open conduit for folks for that. Early on, I bet you could go back and listen to some of my early tapes, and I probably was more opinionated and maybe a little more lippy than I needed to be,
Uh-huh.
right? And then you kind of start settling in to the groove. And they say it takes about 10 years, right, for a broadcaster to be fully comfortable with themselves or their
Mm-hmm.
voice or whatever, and not care about over inflection or whatever. Anyways, or being okay with silence, at times. Um, Now, if you were to listen now compared to the old days, I really just let people talk. And I know that that's a big change, especially with morning drive radio, where it has to be kind of fast paced and
Yeah.
people are moving. My conversations, they average 10, 12 minutes a piece because I like to have the person talk. This is their opportunity. Maybe this will be the only time they've ever had on the radio, or maybe this is something that's very passionate to them, and they finally have somebody that's willing to listen to them and get that information out there. Folks call me on the phone sometimes, and I'll be on the phone with them for an hour or an hour and a half, just listening to them. They feel as though they can't turn to anyone else. Maybe there's a issue with the sheriff or with the police, or something's going on here, and they've tried different routes to have people listen, and somehow they either say, well, Jeff listens, or let's call Jeff. And man, I'll just listen, and I'll come home from the day and I say, I was on the phone with a gentleman today for an hour and a half, and he just needed someone to listen to him. And if I can do that and have them feel like someone finally listened to them, then that's a pretty cool thing.
Listening is a very underrated skill. And it's a skill that some people develop well, like you were talking about. Others never develop it. It's that dead air thing. Oh my gosh, there's dead air, so I have to interject. When that dead air may be just like 1 second or
Sure.
so. And that 1 second can mean a whole world of difference for that person you're interviewing and the information they're able to give you. It'd be wonderful if more people learned that skill, Jeff, which
I
you obviously did.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know how on TV, at least I feel like I know how it is on TV. If you watch these talking heads, they're talking, and then the other person talks, and then they just go back and forth. There's not really a conversation. It's their point, the other person's point, while the other person, is getting yelled in their ear to ask this question or to wrap it up or to do this or
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And it's just really important. It's just really important to give people that courtesy to listen to them. I go into my interviews nowadays, mostly like what we were talking about. We know who the people are. It's the same folks every year. So I kind of know the what the interview is going to be about.
Mm-hmm.
But I very rarely take a bunch of super notes or have a bunch of questions prepared. I'll have the first two or three, and then it's kind of like a football game, right? The quarterback has the first two or three plays that they're going to go through, and then it's a situational. So you listen, and then you're able to ask questions based on what the person's actually saying, not your agenda of the questions you want to ask.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because people try to steer interviews. Um, a little story about a former law enforcement official who shall remain nameless. But when I was working here at KMAS in the news, you knew that if you just gave him enough rope, even though he's telling you he's not going to give you any information on the story, you just keep him talking, you're going to get that confidential information out of him.
Uh-huh.
And by God, it worked like a charm, just shutting up
Yeah.
and letting it go. Man, this is a great story. um, something I think is interesting, and I know that you've done it, and other folks in other small markets have tried to do this with varying levels of success, and you've been successful with this. When I came to Shelton in 1980 to work here, the county population was about 31,000 folks.
Okay.
The last census has the population at about 71,000 folks.
Wow.
A man who I consider one of my mentors, John Hendricks, who works in radio in Montana still, told me something really interesting here. Let's see if I can remember. I wrote it down so I could remember it. Said he stressed that you report on the community as if it was larger than it was. Your community is unique, and so should its stature. And the example being that even though Mason County has 71,000 folks in it, I think the interesting stories that people have to tell, the interesting stories that occur in the community and the events, that local media has a role to make people feel proud of their community and make them feel their community has much more stature than folks outside of it would feel. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had an opportunity 5 or 6 years ago now, I suppose, with the Rural Development Initiative. Were you part of that? Any of those groups?
Yeah.
So that first cohort worked close and did the buddy benches all around the county at all the elementary schools. And one of the things that we talked about all the time was the fact that Shelton is so blessed to have a weekly newspaper, a radio station with a news website. We also have Mason Web TV, which is another news website. And all of that attention put onto a community where the city's population is about 12,000. The like you said, the rest of the county is at about 70 now, and there's only one incorporated city in the whole county, and yet it has all of that media opportunity to focus on it. It's a real gem that is here that I think a lot of people eventually kind of take for granted.
Media rich. There are many communities that may be media rich, but they're sure news poor.
Sure.
and if you, just like you and I probably do the same thing, you're traveling cross country and you're scanning the dial and you tune in a local station and you can tell, boy, that's a local station.
Yeah.
Or you tune in the station and you're going, yeah, I want to go visit that town. And there's the real qualitative difference between those two. And I think that's something that's a value that a local media, be it print, electronic, or broadcast, can bring to a community. And I felt that you've had that kind of a ethic or feeling towards it.
I've tried, to really. I get that the station signal is very robust. It's a daytime 10,000 watts, the most powerful AM between Seattle and Portland is here in Shelton at KMAS. Now with the addition of the FM at 103.3, the signal is broad. There, on a good day, even on a cloudy day, you can listen to the AM all the way up to Wild Waves. And for how hyper focused we are, at least in the mornings, on Shelton, there is a lot of this population. We say about 2.5 million people possibly could be listening in our area.
Oh,
if you look at the map and kind of see how that works. And obviously they're not all listening. I get that. But to have that opportunity to highlight and focus on Shelton and Mason County for that broader of an audience, I think really helps, kind of show off people. There'll be people that I know that have friends in Puyallup, and they're driving around, they hear their friend on the radio talking about something going on in Shelton. And and they're all the way in Puyallup and they're listening because they like Dave Ramsey or something like that. But it can draw the attention back into what's going on here, and it does put a good spotlight on what happens here. It is a good community, and to have that media resources continues to be a super important thing.
Let's talk about technology here for a bit, because before we started this interview, I was joking around about the 1980s. I probably had to be a member of the Charles Atlas School of Broadcasting to schlep around the stuff that was necessary to get recordings, to get pictures. which you could not put on electronic media or anything
Right.
like that. But to get all that information together to present news or interview programs, things like that. So going from that duffel bag to virtually everything you'd ever want in this device or the device we're being recorded on
Uh-huh.
is just absolutely fascinating. Not only the technology, but the use of it. So maybe we can start with the change of technology and how that's affected you
Yeah.
in your work.
Well, I mean, were you here when you'd have to have the phone line down to the First Baptist Church for the Sunday
Oh
programming?
God, yes. And I would get calls from people wanting to know if they were talking or singing so they could tune it in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to go from that to at my time at KGY was doing records. We still had records and the record players, so I was able to be part of that music part of the DJing aspect. And then coming here where it was all on CDs and computer for some of it, MP3s,
Mhm.
was a total new adventure. And then I remember as we started to automate more and more of the station, how we were learning those aspects of it. And then I remember one day two things here. I remember Dale and Jerry came back from a conference from Wisconsin and they said, "Hey, we've got the next big thing. It's going to be MasonCountyDailyNews.com." And I said, "What's that?" They're like, "Well, check out DoorCountyDailyNews.com." I was like, "All right, I will." So it's some Wisconsin County news website. And there were some news on KMAS.com at that time, but this was a totally new thing for us and for Dale and Jerry and for me. So I remember then them going, "Okay, how are we going to do this?" And so learning kind of HTML with Office front page 2003, I think, you know, they said, "Well, make a website." And I remember we had frames, and this was before there was any broadband in Mason County. So people will call us constantly and say, "Your website sucks because I have dial up internet and we can't load the frames. The pictures aren't loading in this." I'm like, "Okay, well, back to the drawing board." And then I remember the day where Dale said, "We're going to add cameras to the broadcast." And I was completely against adding video to this thing. And he goes, "Well, we're going to try it." And so we had some old USB webcams, and I can't even think about how we did it, but that was the start of doing all of this video that we're doing now. It was crazy.
Well, it's interesting how the evolution of radio was spinning the discs, the
Yeah.
stacks and stacks, a hot wax and the platter pad,
Uh huh.
to going to electronic versions of those
Uh
songs,
huh.
to going to information like this, which is making what was radio, which was audio, to visual and also World Wide Web. It's fascinating how some people have adapted to that and others haven't, and it's something that I think that you've taken advantage of.
I mean, back in your day here, you could have worn your sweatpants all day.
I did.
And for the most part, I did too, until he says we're adding video. And now I gotta go, geez, I gotta get my hair cut now. I gotta,
That old joke about you got a face for radio never worked
yeah.
again.
No, man, I tell you, it was crazy. And then just the ability to do remotes. I remember one Loving golf tournament. I think it was the Loving tournament. I don't know. But it was out at the Alderbrook. And they're like, "Let's try to do a remote broadcast." And at this point, there was very few people working here at the station, less than we needed. How about that? And so if the show started at 6, we had to be at the Alderbrook at 4:30 or 5, which means I came through here at about 3 to turn the buttons and set the mixers to hopefully work by themselves while I'm up at the golf course getting ready to broadcast through. And Dale and Jerry were so kind in to me in letting me try those types of things. We knew that Sure, if there was dead air, it would sound terrible. But at the end of the day, too, we were kind of testing things. And, you know, nobody's going to die. It's just radio.
Yeah, it's always changing. You can always fix it or fill.
Yeah, you can always fill.
Well, that's pretty exciting stuff. That you learn stuff by the seat of your pants,
Oh yeah.
and because a lot of this stuff we're talking about, there ain't no manual for it.
No, no. And it doesn't, there is no way you can even write a manual because every situation is so unique. Well, you're off the air. Okay, well it could be 50 different things. You know, you have to kind of think about the time. Okay, you have to think about whether or not there's sunspots, whether or not the logs got, you know, properly input. There's just so many different things that can happen, especially when it's a live product.
Hmm.
You just don't know what to, it's a lot of troubleshooting on the fly. People would be amazed to think about how calm people mostly sound on the air
Hmm.
when in the background the whole place is on fire.
It's like that old analogy about a duck on a pond.
Right, that's exactly it. They're swimming like this, where the head is up top and there it's just kind of dinking around. You're like, yep, here we go. We're just going to have fun, play radio, where everybody on super stressed.
So, as people look back on their broadcast career and either news, interview, radio, there are probably a couple of things that stick out that you say, yeah, that was my turning point, or that was something that gave me the stature to believe I can move on. For me, there were a couple of things. There was the Washington Public Power Supply System debacle in the 80s that gave me the opportunity to do a lot of Associated Press work.
Okay.
And that gave me confidence, a little bit more confidence about uh, reaching out a little bit on stories, and a couple of other things. But that was my first big one. What would you say are some of the things that were turning points for you, maybe as a disc jockey or maybe even as an interviewer, that make you feel proud or helped you become what you are now? Making you think on this one.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's always some things that I hold that kind of were not necessarily turning points, but I guess I completely remember these incidents happening so they don't happen again. I remember it was, and this didn't happen to me, and the names will be changed to protect the
Good job.
innocent here. But we had just had a huge storm here, and um, it was, we were off the air or we were on the air. We were a generator. The whole county seemed to be out of power, and folks were coming through, rotating through, trying to get the information out as best as they can. And I, I was in the newsroom trying to look at maps and understand where people were and where people were talking about what was happening. And the jock on the air was interviewing people, and it was kind of going through the cycle. And you know, it can be long days and long shifts and long hours there, and you kind of, you know, you try to fill in a little bit of your own levity if you can, knowing that the situation, you know, sometimes can call for that. And so the jock was asking some questions to the person on the air, and I'll never forget it. And he asked the person on the air if they were pregnant or not. And I was in the other room, and I dropped my jaw to the ground and probably some plates and things like that, because it quickly became obvious that the person was not pregnant. And so, you know, those types of incidents give you something really to remember as you're formulating questions or you're trying to fill time, what not to do. So that was a big one.
That would have been a good time
Thankfully,
for dead air.
it would have been a good time to say, well, let's take a extended station break. That was a good one. You know, when people have asked me, and again, I don't think I've been here that long. 17 years is a long time, but it just has flown by so fast that I don't really feel like I am doing that, doing that much or skilled in certain aspects, but when people ask me to moderate things, I go, okay, maybe I do know what I'm doing. Or if people ask me to do, interview things, or when people ask to interview me, then I go, oh, well, maybe something good has been going on. So there's a couple of those, like this was a great opportunity to talk with you here. And then some other aspects of being, the other one that's a crazy one is if if I were to think about my first remote, I hardly said a single word on the microphone. I wouldn't say anything. Probably a car show. It was probably the Yes to Your Car Club car show, right? About time for awards. I was just so unsure of myself. And then as the years go by and you see the same folks and you kind of get more comfortable, then you don't care what you say. You're on that mic and you're just having fun with it. And the way that has evolved has kind of shown me, that's probably the biggest one that has shown me the most growth that I've done, where you go from really being timid because you're in here, it's fine because there's nobody, you're talking into the microphone and people are listening, but you don't see them looking back at you. Whereas if you're at a remote and you mess up the person's name, they're going to be the one that's right in front of you that tells you how to pronounce your name right, because that's happened to me a ton.
So let's talk transitions now,
Please.
because you have an exciting opportunity coming up for you.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to be able to explain what you're going to be doing, when you'll be doing it, and how excited you are about it.
I'm very excited, and it's happening soon. And I'm going to be working with Rachel Hansen, who does the Explore Hood Canal website, and she does Tracing the Fjord and all sorts of great tourism and promotion of our community. So, what we've kind of discussed and talked about is expanding what she does to help bring more people into, not only from outside their area to experience it, but the people that are here to be reminded about all the great experiences that we have here. So we're going to take a lot of the stuff that she's worked on and add an audio and visual aspect to it. So we're going to be out. Finally, I can, visit all the county parks and kind of get a good sense of what they're like and go hit the trails and see what it looks like there. I want to kind of visit all the food trucks in the county and see who's got the best, food there. So I might need someone to come with me, out fishing in the lakes, or anything that we can do to help promote and expand the people's awareness of not only the Hood Canal, but our region and the South Puget Sound even. And yeah, so it's happening soon. We're going to start working here in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. So what do you think the skills you've learned here will translate to your success with Rachel and that work?
Well, it's a lot of the interviewing. We're going to do a lot of the stories that people are familiar with, and try to expand on those more with long form audio conversations. The comfortability that I've gotten with the camera to be able to go and do, different hikes here and there and not be necessarily concerned about all that aspects of it. I can just go and do the experience and not feel like oh, the mic and this and that. And then just the people that I've met over the years who I'll hopefully, when I need to call on them, they'll actually answer. We'll see. And, kind of talk with them about what's going on and what we can do to help promote. We do a lot of this day in history. Oh, today's National Strawberry Shortcake Day. Knowing that ahead of time, maybe trying to find a great place in our community that has great strawberry shortcake and making sure folks know about it.
Nice.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Jack Parr once said when he was on the Tonight Show back in the 60s, before
1960s. You're going to have to start prefacing those.
Anyway.
1960s. Wasn't it just Johnny Carson?
Johnny Carson followed him, but Jack Parr once said because they never did a lot of recording of his show. So he said that most of his shows were shoveling smoke. He thought he did great shows, had great guests, but he was just shoveling smoke. Fortunately for you, in a lot of your interviews, you've got them recorded,
Yeah.
and you definitely weren't shoveling smoke. And I know that a lot of people will remember what you've done for them and for this community through your work here at KMAS.
Oh, I thank you.
And that I'm sure will carry over to success in your next position.
Thank you very much. It's probably a good thing that I've done so many interviews that when you Google Jeff Slakey, the first 10 pages or whatever are all interviews that I've done over the years. Um, it's just been a great opportunity. And, early on, and not even middle through, halfway through, whatever, people would say, oh, the voice of Mason County. You've heard that. You used to be the voice of Mason
The
County.
light baritone voice of Mason County, yes.
And so people would say that to me, and my friends would say that to me, and they'd go, oh man, here comes Jeff Slakey, the voice of Mason County. And I'd go, oh, come on, it's not about that at all. But I just feel really honored to have, I guess, taken that moniker for a while and helped to talk about Mason County. And I am not the voice of Mason County. The people are the voice of Mason County. I'm like the conduit, if you will. I'm just the microphone of Mason County. Everybody else is the storyteller, and I'm just been trying to help facilitate that. And it's a great honor, and it's a great a heavy responsibility to have something like that. And yeah, it's just really appreciative, because people for sure could be like, oh, I can only imagine. I bet I could even imagine if I listened to myself the first day I was here. Click. Who's this kid? Who's this kid think he is? Again, 25 maybe. That's how old I was when I started. And I probably today would listen to that kid and go, oh my God, what a mess.
But here you are moving on, and this has been a pleasure, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to interview you on this and share your story, because it's been fascinating.
I don't know why I've never been able to get a chance to sit you down and talk with you over your time here and all that good stuff. That's one interview that we missed that phone call.
We can work on that for later.
Joel, I do appreciate you, and I appreciate you more than you know and more than I realized as we've come to know each other over the years. I knew that you had made a massive impact in our community, and I don't think I fully realized it until, moving on from PUD 3 for your retirement and reflecting on the times that I learned about you here and the times that we worked together through PUD. It's just been a pleasure. And to know that, there's been a lot of good jocks that have come through this place.
There have. And good people.
Good people as well. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Well, congratulations. This has been awesome.
That's been great.
And hopefully we'll be able to do it in the field sometime soon.
Thank you.